Part 1. The burning. The stars disappeared first. Ji-won stood on the bridge of her destroyer and watched the screens go dark. 3,000 alien ships had arrived at Earth's doorstep, and they were so massive that they blocked out the sun itself. Her crew fell silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They just stared at the darkness spreading across their displays. The Velthrons had come. Ji-won had read the reports from the outer colonies. She knew what these aliens did. They ate stars. Not like humans ate food, but they fed on the light and heat that stars produced. They were made of something like living crystal, and they needed that stellar radiation the way humans needed air. For thousands of years they had traveled across the galaxy, finding dying stars and draining them completely. They had conquered 47 different species before humanity. Now it was humanity's turn. The message came through every radio, every computer, every communication device across 12 human star systems. It bypassed all encryption and security. The voice spoke directly into their minds somehow, cold and sharp like breaking glass. Humans, you will submit within 72 hours. You will provide labor for our stellar farms. You will give us access to your sun. If you refuse, we will erase you from existence. We have done this before. We will do it again. Choose quickly. Admiral Hyun was stationed at Proxima Settlement, humanity's largest colony outside the Sol system. He called an emergency meeting with all the colonial governors. Ji-won watched the transmission from her ship. The admiral was old, nearly 70, with gray hair and tired eyes. But when he spoke, his voice was steel. We know what submission means, Hyun said. Intelligence has shown us what happened to the other species the Velthrons conquered. Slavery, slow death. Entire civilizations worked to extinction in their stellar minds. They don't want allies. They want batteries. Living tools. One of the governors, a woman from the Europa colonies, raised her hand. But if we fight, they'll kill us all. Look at their fleet. We can't win, Hyun nodded slowly. Maybe we all die. But at least we die as humans. Free humans. Not slaves. The vote took less than 10 minutes. Every single governor voted to fight. Hyun composed humanity's response himself. It was simple. Just 3 words transmitted back to the Velthron fleet. Come and take it. The Velthrons kept their promise. They started with the Kepler system, a small colony of 3 million people living on terraformed moons around a brown dwarf star. The Velthrons didn't invade. They didn't send troops. They just detonated the star. Minho was a scientist working on Europa Station when it happened. He was studying stellar mechanics, trying to find ways to extend the life of dying stars. He was at his desk when every alarm in the facility started screaming. His computer showed something impossible. The brown dwarf in the Kepler system, located 16 light-years away, had just exploded. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the scream. Every human being everywhere heard it at the same time, not with their ears but inside their heads. 3 million voices screaming in unison as they died instantly. The Velthrons had some kind of psychic technology, and they made sure every human felt those deaths. Minho fell to his knees and vomited. Around him, other scientists were crying, shaking, holding their heads. The message was clear. This is what happens when you refuse. But humanity didn't surrender. The war began in earnest. Velthron fleet swept through human space like a hurricane. They used weapons humanity couldn't fully understand. Particle beams that could slice through a battleship like it was paper. Biological weapons that turned entire atmospheres toxic. And always they used stellar manipulation. Ji-won fought in the Battle of New Sol Station. It was a floating city in space, home to 17,000 civilians. The Velthron fleet arrived without warning. Ji-won's destroyer was one of 5 human ships defending the station. They didn't stand a chance. All ships cover the evacuation transports, Ji-won shouted into her communication system. We hold them here as long as possible. Her ship shook as Velthron weapons tore into the hull. Crew members died at their stations. The lights flickered. The air filled with smoke. But they held. They gave the civilian ships time to run. Ji-won watched on her screens as the transports jumped into faster-than-light travel, carrying thousands of families to safety. Then a Velthron cruiser fired its main cannon. The beam cut directly through the bridge of Ji-won's ship. She saw 3 of her officers simply vanish, turned to atoms in an instant. Abandon ship, she screamed. Everyone to the escape pods. She was one of the last to leave. As her escape pod shot away from the dying destroyer, She saw New Sol Station explode behind her. The Velthrons didn't capture it. They just destroyed it. Scorched Earth. Leave nothing behind. Dayun was the chief engineer aboard humanity's flagship, the Horizon's Edge. It was the pride of the human fleet, a massive dreadnought that carried 10,000 crew and enough firepower to level a moon. She thought it would make a difference. She was wrong. The Horizon's Edge engaged a Veltron battle group near Mars. The fighting lasted 18 minutes. That was all. The Veltron ships moved like living things flowing around human weapons fire. Their shields absorbed everything, and their weapons cut through human armor like it wasn't even there. Dayun was in the engine room when the ship broke in half. The artificial gravity failed. She went weightless, floating among the screaming crew and flying debris. Emergency lights flashed red. A massive explosion threw her against a wall and she felt her ribs crack. "Get to the life pods," someone yelled. She couldn't see who. The smoke was too thick. Dayun crawled through the broken ship. She found a life pod with 12 other survivors crammed inside. They launched just as the Horizon's Edge exploded behind them. The life pod had minimal supplies. Limited oxygen. No faster than light drive. They drifted in space, hoping someone would find them. It took 18 days. 18 days of slowly suffocating, rationing water one drop at a time, watching 2 crew members die from their injuries. When the rescue ship finally arrived, Dayun was barely conscious. By the end of the first month, humanity had lost 40% of its territory. 8 billion people were dead. Entire colonies were gone, turned into radiation-scorched rocks floating in space. The Velthrons didn't just conquer, they consumed. They stripped atmospheres. They poisoned water. They killed everything and left only ash. The survivors retreated deeper into Sol System, toward the outer planets where the Velthrons hadn't reached yet. Jiwan's escape pod was picked up near Jupiter. Dayun recovered in a hospital on Titan. Minho evacuated Europa before the Velthrons arrived. They all ended up in the same place. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, humanity's last major stronghold. Underground, in caverns carved from ice and rock, the remnants of human government and military gathered. They called it the Iron Assembly, and they made a decision that would change everything. Part 2. The Retreat into Darkness. The caverns under Titan's frozen surface were never meant to hold this many people. Thousands of survivors packed into spaces designed for hundreds. The air recyclers ran constantly, struggling to keep up. Everything smelled like sweat and fear and desperation. President Sujin stood at the center of the largest cavern, looking at the faces around her. These were the people who were supposed to lead humanity: generals, scientists, politicians, colony governors. Now they were just refugees hiding underground while their species died. "We need to talk about surrender," someone said. It was a governor from the Ganymede colonies. His name was unimportant now. Everything felt unimportant. "We can't win this war. Maybe if we offer better terms, they'll let some of us live." Admiral Hyun slammed his fist on the table. The old man had aged 10 years in the past month. His hair had gone completely white. "Have you forgotten Kepler? They killed 3 million people to make a point. They don't negotiate. They consume." Intelligence Director Yunji stepped forward. She carried a data pad filled with information that made her sick to look at. "The Admiral is correct. I've analyzed every record we have of Veltron conquests. 47 species before us. The pattern is always identical. Invasion, consumption, extinction. Some species surrendered immediately. Some fought for decades. The result was always the same. Total erasure." The cavern fell silent. Nobody wanted to hear it, but they all knew it was true. Kyung stood near the back. He was a Marine commander, decorated for his defense of Mars. He had held the line for 3 days while civilians evacuated. His entire battalion died buying that time. Now he stood here, survivor's guilt eating him alive, and listened to people debate surrender. He couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Then we make them pay," Kyung said. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. "If we're going to die anyway, we take them with us." A young fleet commander named Taeyang pushed through the crowd. He was only 32, too young for the rank he held. But most of the older commanders were dead. He carried plans, designs, something he had been working on since the war started. "We can do more than make them pay," Taeyang said. "We can win?" Everyone stared at him like he was crazy. President Sujin gestured for him to continue. Taeyang activated a holographic display. It showed a star rotating slowly in the center of the cavern. The Velthrans feed on stellar radiation. They've built their entire civilization around it. Artificial star farms. Captured stars. They need that radiation to survive the way we need oxygen. It's their greatest strength. He paused, letting that sink in. It's also their greatest weakness. Minho recognized what Taiyang was suggesting immediately. He stepped forward, his scientific mind already running calculations. You want to weaponize stellar engineering? We have the technology. We've been using it for terraforming, for extending the life of dying stars. But if we reverse the process, we can kill stars, Taiyang finished. We can freeze them, make them go cold and dead, remove the radiation the Velthrans need to live. The silence in the cavern was absolute. What Taiyang was proposing wasn't just warfare. It was genocide. Not against soldiers, but against an entire species. Their civilians, their children, everyone. Dayun spoke up from where she sat, still recovering from her injuries. That would require massive resources. We'd need to build specialized ships, weapons designed specifically to disrupt stellar fusion, and we'd have to deliver them directly to Velthron space, past all their defenses. I know, Taiyang said. It would take everything we have left. Every ship, every resource, every life we can spare, and most of us wouldn't come back. President Sujin looked around the cavern. She saw the faces of humanity's survivors, exhausted, terrified, grieving, but also angry. So incredibly angry. You're talking about exterminating them, she said slowly. Not just defeating them, extinction. Taiyang met her eyes. They're doing it to us right now. We have two choices. Die with honor, or live as the species that fought back. I know which one I choose. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for mercy, saying that becoming genocidal monsters would make humanity no better than the Velthrans. Others argued for survival, pointing out that mercy meant nothing if you were extinct. Still others argued about practicality, questioning whether such a plan could even work. Minho provided the calculations. It's possible. Difficult but possible. We'd need to build stellar disruption devices, large torpedoes that can trigger a cascade collapse in a star's fusion core. If we hit enough of their artificial stars simultaneously across multiple systems, we could trigger empire-wide collapse. Yunji added intelligence analysis. The Velthran Empire spans approximately 60 major systems. They have a throne world called SciFiPrime, powered by a massive artificial star. If we destroy that, the psychological impact alone could shatter their war effort. Kyung talked about military logistics. We'd need boarding teams to sabotage their stellar harvesters. Those machines protect their artificial stars. Someone has to get close and disable those protections. It would be suicide missions, but soldiers would volunteer. Ji-won was there too, listening. She had been promoted to captain after surviving New Seoul Station. They needed experienced ship commanders, and dead heroes couldn't lead. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it simple. How many ships would we need? 200, Taeyang answered. Strike groups hitting 60 different targets simultaneously. We'd need to scatter across 60 light-years of space, coordinate the attacks perfectly, and hope enough of us survive to deliver the weapons. And the crew? Maybe 200,000 people total. About half our remaining military. Ji-won nodded slowly. Half their military. Gone. Either dead in the attack or stranded in Veltron space with no way home. But if it worked, if they could actually kill the Veltron Empire. President Sujin called for a vote. It had to be unanimous, she decided. A choice this terrible couldn't be made by a simple majority. Every leader present had to agree or they wouldn't do it. The cavern fell completely silent. Sujin looked around at each person. Governors, generals, scientists, survivors. She raised her hand. I vote yes. One by one, hands rose. Admiral Hyun, Commander Kyung, Engineer Dayun, Captain Ji-won, Scientist Minho, Intelligence Director Yunji, Fleet Commander Taeyang. Every single person in that cavern raised their hand. The vote was unanimous. President Sujin spoke formally, her voice echoing off the ice walls. Then it's decided. We authorize Project Frostfall. We will build weapons to kill stars. We will strike at the heart of the Velthron Empire, and we will show them what happens when you try to extinguish humanity. She paused, looking at the faces around her. Good people. People who never wanted to become killers. People who had no choice left. May whatever gods exist forgive us for what we're about to do. The work began immediately. Hidden shipyards in Saturn's rings came alive with construction. Engineers worked around the clock designing new weapons. The Black Armada, they called it. Ships painted black as the void, carrying death to distant stars. Diane led the weapons design team. She created stellar disruption torpedoes, each one carrying enough exotic matter to trigger a star's collapse. She worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping, trying not to think about the billions who would die when these weapons were used. Kyung trained 20,000 Marines for boarding operations. They practiced in simulation chambers, learning to fight in zero gravity aboard alien ships. Everyone knew these were suicide missions. Nobody backed down. Minho made the breakthrough that changed everything. Working in his laboratory, analyzing captured Velthron technology, he discovered something crucial. The Velthrons weren't just dependent on stellar radiation in general. They needed a specific wavelength, a particular frequency that their artificial stars all produced. If we can freeze their stars, Minho explained to the engineering team, if we can turn them cold and dead, the Velthrons will starve. Not over months or years. Over days, maybe hours. Their biology will simply shut down without that radiation. It made the weapons even more terrible, but also more effective. 6 months of preparation. 6 months of building ships and training crews and preparing for the largest military operation in human history. Jiwon was given command of the lead dreadnought, the Frosthammer. It was a massive ship, bristling with weapons carrying enough stellar torpedoes to kill a dozen stars. On the day the Black Armada launched, 200 ships gathered in formation beyond Saturn. 200,000 crew members, knowing most of them would never come home, knowing that if they failed, humanity would die, knowing that if they succeeded, they would become the monsters that history remembered. President Soo-jin broadcast a final message to the fleet. You carry humanity's survival in your hands. You also carry its conscience. I won't lie to you. What we're asking you to do is terrible, but necessary. The Velthrons left us no choice. Come home if you can. Win if you must. But whatever happens, know that humanity will never forget what you did for us. The Black Armada jumped into faster-than-light travel. 200 ships vanished into the darkness, heading toward Velthron space. Heading toward genocide. Heading toward a victory that would haunt humanity forever. Part 3. The Strike. The journey through faster-than-light space took 6 months. 6 months of waiting, thinking, and preparing for what was coming. Jiwon walked through the corridors of the Frosthammer every day, seeing her crew of 3,000 faces. Young faces, tired faces, scared faces pretending to be brave. They all knew what they were going to do. They had volunteered anyway. In the mess hall, soldiers ate their meals in silence. In the training rooms, Marines practiced boarding maneuvers for the 100th time. In the engine rooms, engineers maintained the stellar torpedoes, checking and rechecking systems that had to work perfectly. One mistake and entire star systems might survive. One mistake and humanity would die. Halfway through the journey, a message arrived from Sol System. It came through the quantum communication network, traveling faster than light. The news was bad. The Velthrons had reached Earth. Jiwon read the report on her private screen. The enemy fleet was beginning the final harvest of humanity's homeworld. They were draining Sol itself, setting up massive collection satellites to siphon fusion energy directly from the sun. Earth's temperature was already dropping. Crops were failing. People were freezing. They had maybe 3 months before Earth became uninhabitable. Jiwon forwarded the message to all 200 ships in the Black Armada. The response was immediate. Every ship increased speed, pushing their engines to maximum. Safety margins were ignored. They would reach Velthron space faster or die trying. Nobody wanted to come home to a frozen Earth. Taeyang commanded the strike group targeting the Velthron throne world. His fleet consisted of 15 ships, including his flagship, the Dark Winter. He stood on the bridge and looked at the holographic display showing HFY. The planet was massive, 3 times Earth's size, covered in crystalline structures that caught and magnified starlight. At the center of the system hung an artificial star, a sphere of controlled fusion larger than Jupiter. It powered the entire throne world. Billions of Velthrons lived in the light of that false sun. All ships, Taeyang transmitted. We arrive in 10 minutes. You know the plan. We punch through their orbital defenses. We deliver the torpedoes. We don't worry about getting home. We just make sure those weapons reach the target. his crew acknowledged. 15 ships, 40,000 people. Against the most heavily defended system in the Velthron Empire. They came out of faster-than-light travel and immediately started taking fire. Velthron defense satellites opened up with particle beams. Ships on patrol converged on their position. The Dark Winter's shields held for maybe 30 seconds before they started failing. All power to forward shields, Taeyang shouted. Weapons fire at will. We just need to get close enough. His fleet pushed forward. Ships exploded around him. The destroyer on his left flank broke apart, crew dying instantly in the void. The cruiser on his right lost its engines and started drifting, but they kept moving forward. Torpedo range in 2 minutes. His weapons officer called out. A Velthron battleship appeared in front of them, massive and crystalline and beautiful. It fired its main cannon. The beam cut through 3 human ships in a single shot. But those 3 ships had bought time. The rest of the fleet reached firing range. Launch torpedoes, Taeyang ordered. Everything we have. 60 stellar torpedoes launched from the surviving human ships. Dark projectiles, each carrying enough exotic matter to destabilize a star. The Velthron defenses tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. 42 torpedoes got through. They hit the artificial star at different points across its surface and detonated simultaneously. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the star flickered. The fusion reaction stuttered, stopped, started again. Stopped again. The artificial star began to die. It's working! Someone screamed on the bridge. Taeyang watched the displays as the star's temperature dropped. The fusion reaction that had burned for thousands of years simply froze. The star became a cold sphere of dead matter, still held together by gravity but producing no light. No heat, no radiation. Across HFY billions of Velthrons began to die. Without the specific radiation frequency they needed, their silicon-based biology shut down. They froze from the inside out, crystallized, shattered. The throne world died in less than 8 hours, but so did Taeyang's fleet. Every single ship, the Velthron forces, realizing what had happened, attacked with suicidal fury. They didn't care about tactics anymore. They just wanted revenge. The Dark Winter was the last human ship to go, its hull breached in a dozen places, its crew dead at their stations. Taeyang's last transmission was simple. Target destroyed. Sol Group, you're up? Make it count. Across 60 different star systems, the same attacks unfolded. Human ships burst out of faster-than-light travel and dove straight into hell. They faced impossible odds. They died by the thousands, but they delivered their weapons. Jiwan's group hit the military shipyards at Kelthros, a binary star system where the Velthrons built their war fleet. The Frosthammer led 12 other ships in a direct assault. They ignored the smaller targets and went straight for the stellar harvesters, the massive machines that protected the binary stars. Boarding teams, prepare for launch, Jiwan ordered. Kyung was on one of those boarding teams. He sat in the assault pod with 50 other Marines checking his weapons one last time. They were going to board a Velthron stellar harvester, fight their way to the core and plant quantum charges on the radiation collectors. It was suicide. They all knew it. Kyung thought about his family dead on Mars and felt nothing but cold determination. 30 seconds to launch, the pilot called. The assault pods fired from the Frosthammer. 20 pods, each carrying 50 Marines, shot toward the nearest stellar harvester. Velthran point defense systems shot down half of them. Kyung's pod made it through. They crashed into the harvester's hull and cut their way inside. The interior was like nothing Kyung had ever seen. Crystalline corridors filled with radiation that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. Good thing they wore heavy armor. Velthran warriors met them immediately. They looked like living statues, beautiful and terrible, made of some kind of silicon crystal that shimmered in the harsh light. They didn't use guns. They used energy weapons built into their bodies. Kyung and his Marines fought through corridor after corridor. They lost people at every turn, but they kept moving forward. The quantum charges were in sealed containers, protected even if the Marines died. They reached the core chamber. 5 Marines left out of 50. Kyung planted the charges himself while the others held the entrance. Velthran warriors poured in. His Marines died one by one, buying him time. Charges set. Kyung transmitted. Detonating in 10 seconds. All teams, get out if you can. He activated the timer and ran. Made it maybe 50 meters before the charges went off. The explosion tore through the stellar harvester, destroying its ability to protect the binary stars. Without that protection, Jiwan's stellar torpedoes could reach their targets. Kyung survived. Barely. He woke up in a medical bay on the Frost Hammer, missing his left arm and half his face burned from radiation exposure, but they had done it. The binary stars of Kelthros were dying. Daeun commanded a technical squadron of 6 ships. Their mission was different. While others attacked with weapons, her team attacked with information. They had captured Velthron communication codes stolen during earlier battles. Now they used those codes to hack into the Velthron stellar management network. It was surprisingly easy. The Velthrons never expected anyone to attack their star systems. They had no security protocols for this. Daeun's team uploaded viruses that spread through their network like wildfire, disabling safety protocols on hundreds of artificial stars simultaneously. Upload complete, Daeun reported to Fleet Command. Their entire stellar management system is compromised. Stars across their empire will start experiencing cascade failures within hours. It was elegant, efficient, and absolutely horrifying. Daeun had just condemned billions to death with the press of a button. She threw up in a waste bin on her bridge. Her crew pretended not to notice. Minho wasn't with the attack fleet. He stayed on Titan, monitoring results as they came in. His laboratory was full of displays showing Velthron star systems. One by one, those stars began to die. The light went out. The heat vanished. The specific radiation frequency that Velthron biology needed simply disappeared. He watched entire civilizations die in real time. Not soldiers, not warriors, everyone. Old Velthrons, young Velthrons, Velthron children who had never known war. It's working, his assistant said, voice hollow. Every target is experiencing stellar collapse. Estimated Velthron casualties are in the hundreds of billions. Minho said nothing. What was there to say? He had discovered the radiation frequency that made this genocide so efficient. He had provided the knowledge that turned warfare into extinction. He would carry that weight forever. Of the 200 ships in the Black Armada, only 37 survived to retreat. 163 ships gone, 150,000 crew dead. But they had done it. 60 Velthron star systems were dying or dead. The artificial stars that had powered their empire for millennia were going cold, and the Velthrons were dying with them. Not from violence, from starvation. Their biology evolved to feed on stellar radiation. Part 4. The reckoning news traveled at the speed of light through the Velthron Empire. That was the problem with having an empire spread across 60 star systems. When disaster struck at the center, the edges didn't know for months, and by then it was too late. The Velthron fleet besieging Earth received word that SciFiPrime had gone dark 30 days after it happened. The transmission came through cold and mechanical. The throne world was dead. The royal family was dead. The artificial star that had burned for 3,000 years was a frozen sphere of inert matter. And then the other reports started arriving. Kelthros dark, Bilmara dark, Krithis dark, system after system going silent, stars dying, populations vanishing. The Empire wasn't just losing the war, it was dying. The Velthron commander and Sol system was named Kelvrath. He had been besieging Earth for 3 months, slowly draining the sun, planning to leave humanity's homeworld as a frozen rock. When the news came, he stood in his command chamber and felt something Velthrons rarely experienced. Fear. His crew looked to him for orders. They were soldiers, warriors, but they were also people with families on the homeworlds. Families that were probably dead now. Pull back, Kelvrath ordered. Set course for SciFiPrime, maximum speed. His officers stared at him. Sir, we're in the middle of the final harvest. The humans are nearly defeated. The humans have already won, Kelvrath said quietly. They've killed our empire. We're going home to see if anything survives. The Velthron fleet abandoned Earth, not in an organized retreat. In a panicked rout, ships simply turned and left, jumping into faster-than-light travel without coordination. Some went to the throne world. Others went to their birth colonies. Many went to systems that were already dead and didn't know it yet. The Velthron Empire fractured. Military discipline collapsed. Without the central authority of the throne world, fleet commanders made their own decisions. Some tried to continue the war. Others retreated to save their families. A few, realizing that their entire species was facing extinction, simply shut down their ships and waited for death in the void. Jiwan led the relief fleet to Earth. Her frost hammer was still being repaired, so she commanded from a borrowed destroyer. When she arrived, she expected to find ruins. What she found was somehow worse. Earth was still there, still inhabited, but it was dying slowly. The Velthrons had been draining Sol for months. The sun's output had decreased by 8%. That didn't sound like much, but it was enough. Global temperatures had dropped. Storms ravaged the planet. Crops failed. 3 billion people had died from cold and starvation. My God, Jiwon whispered, looking at the planet from orbit. What did they do? But she knew what they did. The same thing humanity had done to 60 Veltron worlds. They had killed the star, or tried to. Sol would recover eventually, but millions more would die before it did. Admiral Hyun commanded the fleet retaking Proxima Settlement. The Velthron occupation force there had received news of the Throne World's death and simply surrendered. Not because they wanted mercy, because they had nowhere left to go. Their home was dead. Their families were dead. Fighting seemed pointless now. Hyun accepted their surrender and put them in detention camps. He didn't know what else to do with them. Executing prisoners felt wrong after everything humanity had already done. But keeping them alive required resources humanity didn't have. The Velthron prisoners weren't violent. They were broken. They sat in the camps and slowly starved, their silicon biology crystallizing without the stellar radiation they needed. Hyun ordered engineers to build artificial radiation emitters to keep them alive. Some of his officers protested. These were the enemy. Let them die. We've killed enough, Hyun said quietly. I won't be responsible for more deaths if I can prevent it. But he couldn't prevent what happened next. As humanity retook colony after colony, they found the atrocities. The Velthrons, in their final days of occupation, had enacted revenge. Cities melted by orbital bombardment, populations killed by biological weapons, entire settlements erased from existence. On Mars, Kyung returned to find his home colony destroyed. Not just defeated, obliterated. The Velthrons had deployed a weapon that turned the atmosphere itself toxic. Everyone died. 200 million people, the colony where he was born, where his family had lived. He stood in the ruins wearing a protective suit and felt nothing. Not anger. Not grief. Just empty, hollow. He had survived the war, fought in the worst battles, lost his arm and half his face. And for what? To come home to this? Other colonies told similar stories. The Velthrons couldn't win anymore, so they made sure humanity would suffer. Biological weapons, radiation bombs, atmospheric poisoning. 8 billion dead in the initial invasion had become 12 billion by the war's end. President Sujin broadcast from Geneva, standing in the ruins of the old United Nations headquarters. Her speech was transmitted across all human space. We won, she said. Her voice was flat, empty. The Velthron Empire is destroyed. Their fleets are scattered. Their homeworlds are dead. Humanity has survived. She paused, looking at the camera with exhausted eyes. But the cost of survival is something we will carry forever. 12 billion of our people are dead. Our homeworld is damaged, perhaps permanently. And we became the very thing we fought against. We became genocidal monsters. We killed an entire species, not just their soldiers, everyone. Across human space, people watched in silence. There were no celebrations, no parades. Victory felt hollow when you had to become a monster to achieve it. Intelligence Director Yoonji was working in her office on Titan when she received the report. A scout ship had detected a Velthron signal in a remote system, far from the main empire. She analyzed the transmission and felt her blood run cold. It was a request for negotiations. The last remnants of the Velthron leadership, approximately 2,000 survivors, were hiding in a system powered by a small natural star they had found. They were offering everything: technology, knowledge, secrets, in exchange for asylum, for the right to survive. Yoonji brought the message to President Sujin immediately. The Iron Assembly reconvened. The same people who had voted for genocide 6 months ago now had to decide whether to finish the job. The debate was bitter and angry. They're asking for mercy, one governor said, something they never showed us. But maybe that's the point. Maybe showing mercy is how we prove we're better than them. Better? Kyung stood up, his scarred face twisted with rage. They killed my family. They killed billions. They would have made humanity extinct if we hadn't struck first. And now we're supposed to let them survive? Dayun spoke quietly from her seat. I helped kill billions of them. I uploaded the viruses that collapsed their star systems. I murdered entire worlds with the press of a button. If we kill these last survivors, what does that make us? What line haven't we crossed? The argument went on for hours. Some wanted total extinction. Every Velthran dead, no exceptions. Others wanted mercy, believing that humanity needed to prove it was better than its enemies. Still others were simply tired. Tired of killing. Tired of war. Tired of being forced to make terrible choices. Finally, President Sujin called for a vote. Those in favor of granting asylum to the Velthran survivors? Hands went up slowly. Not many at first. Then more. Daiyun, Admiral Hyun, Jiwan after a long hesitation. Scientists who wanted to study Velthran technology. Governors who were tired of death. Those opposed? More hands, Kyung. Some of the military commanders. People who had lost too much to forgive. People who feared the Velthrans might recover someday. The final count was close. So close that President Sujin had to count 3 times to be sure. Mercy won by a single vote. The 2,000 surviving Velthrans were transported to a cold station in deep space. Engineers built artificial radiation emitters to sustain them. They became living prisoners, the last of their species, kept alive as a reminder of the cost of conquest. But not everyone agreed with the decision. A faction formed in secret. Military officers, intelligence agents, people who believed that the only good Veltran was a dead Veltran. They called themselves the Final Winter. And they had access to the Black Armada's remaining weapons. 1 stellar torpedo. That was all they needed. 1 torpedo smuggled out of a military depot. 1 ship to deliver it. 1 star to destroy. They worked in complete secrecy. Kyung was part of it, though later he would claim he was just following orders. A transport ship was requisitioned. The torpedo was loaded aboard. A course was set for the remote system where the Velthran survivors lived. It took 3 months to reach the target. 3 months for anyone to notice something was wrong, but by then it was too late. The ship arrived at the Velthran survivor colony and launched its weapon. The natural star that sustained the last 2,000 Velthrans flickered and died. Just like the others. Just like all the stars humanity had killed. Within days, the last Velthrans were dead, crystallized, frozen, extinct. When news reached Titan, President Sujin was in a meeting with Admiral Hyun. An aide rushed in with the report. Sujin read it twice, not believing what she was seeing. "They're gone," she said quietly. "The last Velthrans. Someone killed them." Hyun closed his eyes. "Who?" "We're investigating." "But does it matter?" "They're extinct now. Completely extinct. And we did it." Part 5. The frost never thaws. 50 years passed. Half a century of rebuilding. Half a century of trying to forget what humanity had done. But the universe doesn't forget. And neither did humanity itself. Admiral Jiwan stood in the Galactic Assembly, representing humanity to the coalition of species that had formed after the Velthran Empire's collapse. She was 80 years old now, her hair completely white, her body kept functional by medical technology that previous generations could only dream about. She wore her military uniform, the medals heavy on her chest. Each one represented a battle. Each one represented deaths. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was enormous, a rotating station that housed representatives from 40 different species. Species that the Velthrans had conquered and enslaved. Species that humanity had inadvertently liberated by committing genocide. They called humanity heroes, liberators, saviors. They also called humanity the Frostbringers. They spoke in whispers about the species that killed stars. And when disputes arose in the assembly, when tensions escalated between worlds, they always looked at humanity nervously, wondering if humanity might use its weapons again. "We're feared," Jiwan reported back to President Sujin, who was serving her 6th term now. "The other species are grateful we destroyed the Velthrans, but they're terrified that we might destroy them next." Sujin was 92 years old and looked every day of it. She had refused advanced medical treatments. She said she deserved to age, to feel the weight of years for the decisions she had made. "Are they right to fear us?" Sujin asked. Jiwan thought about that question for a long time. "I don't know. We haven't used stellar weapons since the war. We've been peaceful, but we still have the knowledge. We still have the technology. If another threat appeared, would we use it again? I think the answer terrifies us as much as it terrifies them." Minho was 95 years old now. He taught at Seoul University, which had been rebuilt on Earth's slowly recovering surface. His specialty was stellar mechanics, but he never taught the classified parts. He never explained how to kill a star. That knowledge was locked away, restricted to the highest levels of military research. But his students knew anyway. Everyone knew. The old professor sitting at the front of the lecture hall was the man who had discovered the radiation frequency that made Veltron genocide so efficient. Some students idolized him. Others looked at him with something like horror. After class one day, a young student approached him. She couldn't have been more than 20. Bright-eyed, curious, innocent in the way that people born after the war could be. "Professor, did you really help kill billions of Veltrons?" Minho looked at her for a long moment. "Yes, do you regret it?" "Every single day. But we had to do it, right?" "They would have killed us all." Minho sighed. "That's what we told ourselves. And maybe it was true. Probably it was true. But here's what I learned. Necessity doesn't erase guilt. Just because you had to do something doesn't mean you get to feel good about it. I helped save humanity. I also helped exterminate a species. Both things are true. I carry both forever." The student left looking thoughtful. Minho hoped she would never have to make the choices his generation had made. Dayun ran a relief organization. After the war, she had dedicated her life to helping the species that the Veltrons had enslaved. She spent decades traveling to liberated worlds, providing aid, rebuilding infrastructure, trying to do something good with whatever time she had left. She was 89 now, and her health was failing. The doctors said she had maybe a year left. She refused treatment. Like President Sujin, she felt she deserved to die naturally, deserved to face the end without technological intervention. On her last trip, she visited a world called Kalesh. The Velthrons had enslaved the Kaleshi people for 300 years. When the Velthron Empire fell, the Kaleshi had rebelled and won their freedom. Now they were rebuilding their civilization. The Kaleshi leader met with Dayun personally. She was an elderly female, with green skin and 4 arms, sitting in a simple office that had once been a Veltron prison complex. "Your people saved us," the Kaleshi leader said. "We are grateful." Dayun shook her head. "We didn't save you for altruistic reasons. We saved you by accident as a side effect of our revenge. Does the reason matter? We are free." "It matters to me," Dayun said quietly. "I need you to understand something. The weapons we used against the Velthrons, the stellar torpedoes, the viruses I uploaded, those weren't precision instruments. When we collapsed their stars, we killed everyone in those systems, not just Velthrons.
Anyone who happened to be there.
Enslaved species, prisoners, workers, children." The Kaleshi leader was quiet for a long time. "How many?" "We don't know exactly. Billions. Maybe tens of billions of non-Velthrons died as collateral damage to our attacks." The green skin paled. "I did not know this. Nobody talks about it. We say we killed the Velthron Empire. We don't talk about who else died. I wanted you to know. Because when you remember us as heroes, you should also remember that we're killers. We're both. Always both." Dayun died 6 months later in her sleep in a hospital on Earth. They gave her a military funeral even though she had been a civilian. President Sujin attended. Admiral Jiwan gave the eulogy. They talked about her service, her sacrifice, her dedication to helping others. They didn't talk about the billions she had killed. But everyone thought about it. Kyung was released from prison after 25 years. He had been convicted of unauthorized military action for his role in destroying the last Veltron survivors. 25 years locked away. He came out an old man, 78 years old, his body still bearing the scars from the war. He visited the memorial on Titan. It was a massive structure of black ice, built at the site of the old iron assembly. 8 billion names were inscribed on it, every human who died in the Veltron War. Kyung found his family's names and traced them with his remaining hand, his wife, his 2 children, his parents, all dead on Mars when the Velthrons deployed their atmospheric weapon. "I killed them for you," Kyung whispered to the memorial. "The last Velthrons. I made sure they were extinct. I made sure they could never hurt anyone again." But standing there in the cold looking at his family's names, he felt no satisfaction. No closure. Just emptiness. He had spent 50 years carrying his revenge. And now it felt meaningless. A young woman approached him. She wore a military uniform, a captain's insignia. "Sir, Commander Kyung?" He turned. "Just Kyung now. I'm not a commander anymore." I read about you in training. About the boarding action at Kelthros. You saved the mission. You're a hero, Kyung laughed bitterly. A hero? I'm a murderer. I helped commit genocide. Then I committed more genocide because the first one didn't feel like enough. Don't call me a hero. Call me what I am. A killer who survived long enough to regret it. The captain looked uncomfortable. But we had to fight. They would have killed us all. Yeah, we had to fight. But did we have to exterminate them? Did we have to kill the last survivors? Did I have to be so consumed by revenge that I couldn't let 2,000 people live? He shook his head. I don't know the answers. I've had 25 years in prison to think about it, and I still don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm right. Maybe we're both wrong. On the 50th anniversary of the war's end, President Sujin gave her final address. She was 98 years old, serving her last term. She had decided not to run again. Humanity needed new leadership. Leadership that hadn't been shaped by the war. 50 years ago, she said, standing in the rebuilt UN headquarters, humanity faced extinction. We fought back, we won, and in winning, we became something we never intended to be. We became feared. We became the monsters that other species tell stories about. She paused, looking directly at the camera. Future generations will debate whether we were right, whether genocide was justified by the threat we faced. I can't answer that question. I made the choice. I authorized Project Frostfall. I sent 200,000 people to commit mass murder. And I've carried that weight for 50 years, another pause. Longer this time, here's what I know. Humanity survived. That was the goal. That was the only thing that mattered in that moment. But survival came with a cost. We survived by becoming killers, by freezing stars, by exterminating an entire species. And we can never undo that. We can never go back to being the innocent species we were before the war. She looked tired, so incredibly tired, so what do we do now? We live with it. We remember it. We teach future generations what we did and why we did it. We tell them about the necessity. But we also tell them about the cost, the moral weight, the guilt. We make sure they understand that some victories are so terrible that they feel like defeats. Sujin stepped down from the presidency 3 months later. She died 2 years after that, quietly in her sleep. They built a statue of her on Titan next to the memorial. A leader bearing the weight of impossible choices. Admiral Jiwon lived to be 102 years old. She spent her final years writing a memoir about the war. She called it The Frost We Carry. It became required reading in every human military academy. In the final chapter, she wrote, "We won the war, we saved humanity, and we committed genocide. All 3 things are true. We don't get to pick which one defines us. We have to carry all of them."